Welcome to Season 3's finale of the Backporch Education podcast.
Try that again because it's Season 2.
I really hope that this makes it into the final part. It's been a long time we've been doing this. It feels like 10 seasons.
You can call it Season 36 if you like. But
there we go.
This is the last of Season 2.
All right. I'll do it over. Welcome to the season finale of the second season of the Backporch Education podcast. Today, Steve and I are going to reflect on what has come and speculate on what we see for the future.
You can't have your meat if you don't eat your vegetables.
Backporch Education. All right, very good. And then let's see. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. We have lots to talk about this time around. The last episode
of the season.
That's right, the last episode.
So we can probably skip the poem, right?
No, although we have big changes that we will certainly talk about. One of the things that will not be changing unless Steve is able to arm wrestle me for it or something is the poetry that begins our episodes. So I think I've read this one before. Steve, you've said you don't think that we've read this one before. I think it's worth another read, right?
We have a competition here. Somebody's got to send in the official word. Yes, you have. No, you haven't.
Good. Yeah. Right. Let us know. This one is a Psalm of Life, and it is by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. We have a little epigraph here that reads, "What the heart of the young man said to the psalmist." So here it goes, a Psalm of Life. Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream, for the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul. Not enjoyment and not sorrow is our destined end or way, but to act, that each tomorrow finds us farther than today. Art is long, and time is fleeting, and our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave. In the world's broad field of battle, in the bivouac?
Bivouac.
In the bivouac of life, be not like dumb driven cattle, be a hero in the strife. Trust no future, however pleasant. Let the dead past bury its dead. Act in the living present, heart within, and God o'erhead. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime and, departing, leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. Footprints that perhaps another, sailing o'er life's solemn main, a forlorn and shipwrecked brother, seeing, shall take heart again. Let us then be up and doing, with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing. Learn to labor and to wait.
All right, well, so a wonderful poem about looking forward, for sure, and taking heart, acting, moving forward. There's the footprints in the sands thing that maybe has gotten a little overworn over the years. But
yeah. But that's not Longfellow's fault, right?
No, he had a good idea that people have abused, perhaps.
Right.
But there's a sense in which if you go to wherever it is that you listen to our podcast, you have a number of footsteps, a number of episodes. There's quite a line of footsteps behind us, and starting to. I'm not going to brag about us, but 54, 55 episodes now, I think,
Yeah.
is enough to feel like we're starting to hit our stride, perhaps.
Sure. Good
Um,
job, us.
yeah,
Now,
we're
the
happy.
footsteps are going around in a circle. It must be said.
Well, when you don't know where you're going, uh,
Right. Uh,
yes, yeah.
uh,
But I think there's a strong sense in which we wanted to take this last episode of this season and try and accomplish a few things. One is to sort of remind ourselves that God's been good and we've put up with each other,
mm,
um, and that it seems like a few more people discover us here and there.
mhm.
We're certainly not swimming in followers, and our listeners are encouraged to try and, if you know somebody that would enjoy this, I don't want to inflate our numbers just so that we can have big numbers, but
Sure.
if there's somebody that would be helped by it, uh, pass the information along, share it with them. We'd love to have more folks in particular giving us more questions.
Yeah.
And we have treated a few questions. We have a whole little list of questions from now one of our alumna, I guess you would call her, uh,
Hmm.
Josie Parker, who was on just a couple of episodes ago with her discussion with me about Cambridge University, has over the time of our podcast listened to us faithfully and sent us a number of questions. And we don't want Josie to think that we've forgotten those questions.
No, they're just difficult. We're still working on them, right?
Right. Well, or biding our time for the future. Right.
Sure.
We try to stick to one thing each episode. We don't always manage to keep the rabbit trails from occurring, but try to focus on one thing.
Yeah.
And we've done some things that with the COVID-19 experience that we've had and are at this recording still experiencing.
Hmm.
It has produced, I think, its own effect on what we've done, and in particular, a couple of big things I guess have happened. I kind of hear in my mind's ear the little snarling voice of Toto. Uh,
Okay.
uh, Teeth clenched on the curtain, pulling back the curtain on the Wizard of Oz, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
uh, take no thought for that man behind, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain type thing. I
Uh-huh.
am the great and mighty Oz. We have for a couple of years now been recording this podcast, trying to, I don't know, preserve the fiction that we were both sitting on one of our back porches, rocking in chairs and talking to each other. But while we've both been sitting in chairs talking to each other, it's been several hundred miles apart. The
998 miles.
998, man, just short of 1,000. I'm glad
I
you didn't
know.
move just a couple of miles farther away.
Right.
The story is pretty simple. Jason and I like to talk. That much should be obvious from the podcast.
Yes. Please
And
refer. We would refer you to the previous 54, 55 episodes.
and I guess you should say tragically, there's probably a lot of great episodes that never got recorded. They were just conversations you and I had.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of my feeling was when I found out Jason was moving away, he was here in North Carolina with in the same town as myself. We were at different schools, but acquainted with one another, had mutual friends, whatnot. We get together, we'd have conversations, and I felt like we were just starting to have some interesting conversations when this boy decides to move away.
I did. That's right.
And I think it was at the like last minute. I think you were going to get in your car and leave within hours, and I said to you, when you get settled, let's talk about a podcast.
Yeah.
And there was just like a little spark in your eye that acted like, that might be fun.
Mm-hmm.
And over the months after that, we talked back and forth and bought a couple of microphones and discovered how we could do this over the internet and still produce modicum of quality recordings. And Jason had fun teaching himself to edit. And then as he was busy at times, I got the chance to edit and to enlist one of my dear friends. I don't think Jason's ever met Adrian, but
No, I haven't had the pleasure.
Musician friend of mine here in Greenville. I approached him, said, "Hey, we would love." After the first, was towards the end of the first season, I said, "We ought to have our own music instead of royalty-free stuff that we used first season." And he came up with that. Jason's friend made us a logo.
Yeah, Brett.
And
shout out to Brett. Thanks, Brett Stump.
And of course, Brett's idea was that we would be wearing overalls. And so now that Jason has moved back to town and we're actually in the same city, I'm bound and determined at some point that we update the website with a picture of Jason and I both sitting in overalls on somebody's back porch. But to do that, I'm going to have to buy a pair of overalls because the last pair I had got ripped to shreds, and I haven't. I don't get out on the farm quite as much as I used to.
And I'm going to have to buy a back porch, right? We're looking for a house, but
yeah.
No, we're excited to be back in town, to be close. I would only hasten to add, for all of our listeners, this is no guarantee of any improvement in quality. It's gonna, but we are looking forward to it in a major way. Sort of working these new set of problems through. I would encourage anybody and everybody to start a podcast on anything that they would find interesting, because the process itself, learning how to edit voice recordings, learning how to sort of manipulate sounds and overlay things, uploading to Apple and various other sites. These are all things that are, I think, valuable to a great many people and interesting to know sort of in their own right. I'm tempted to go into a sort of debate, not a debate exactly, but a defense of these skills in an economic way. But I don't think that's needed here. The skills and the tools are interesting enough in themselves to warrant their usage, I think. So, yeah, I have enjoyed our first couple seasons a lot. And I would say, the stuff that sticks out to me is particularly how bad the recording and stuff was at the beginning, and how our learning curve happened. Like that's an encouragement to me to see how much better it is now than it was. I think our content has gotten better as we have as we've grown more comfortable talking in this medium, Steve, right? Like when we can't see each other, I think I've become better at reading audio cues from everybody from doing this sort of really disciplined talking. Okay, really disciplined might be a bit of a stretch, but doing a sort of disciplined talking with you when I don't have you in front of me to read those whatever visual cues too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and I mean, there's all kinds of at least potential possibilities, right? That at some point, if we get passionate enough, now that we'll be sitting next to each other, a fight could break out. So
yes. I don't. Now,
when you're 998 miles away,
that's going to be more audio issues. I don't know how we're going to capture the audio of the fight faithfully.
Bam!
But we're going to try.
Yeah,
get some Batman onomatopoeia going. But there have been other things too. I think the way that you have, Steve, really leaned into your responsibility of being the guy who reacts to the poem has been um, has been really fun. Um,
Well,
and yeah, go ahead.
it's a podcast on education. So
Yes,
let me shock you to your toes
great.
by stating all of and I think most of our listeners know it's in good jest that I give you a hard time about the poems.
Right.
I do like poetry. Jason's love of poetry has produced an effect as I enter my 30th. I'm a week into my 30th year of teaching now.
Mm,
And I teach English, as Jason does as well.
yes.
And this year, I haven't done it to them yet. We started school as we're recording this, but 3 days ago. So, but this coming week, I will launch into a year-long foray. Can I say that correctly? Foray into a poem of the week,
Yeah.
and
Awesome.
they're gonna get a poem from me whether they want it or not. I have a feeling that it will at least enrich me with new and creative arguments for why there shouldn't be poetry
There
that
you
I could
go.
just abjectly steal from my students and thrust
Right.
them upon Jason.
Right. Right.
The poetry makes my dog vomit, or something like that. I don't know.
Right.
But as they give me good ones, I'll be sure to write those down and use them on the podcast. But
That that's fantastic.
I think
No,
one of
dude, for
the
real. I'm glad to hear that though. We obviously I've been reading poetry in my class, in my classes, and it's been great fun, right? I mean, for some, and for others, probably not. But in either case, um, the I don't find the a student's attitudes towards poetry at the beginning of the year to be all that interesting, right? Or instructive to me as a teacher. Um, but it's the movement that's so enjoyable as a teacher,
mm,
right?
yeah.
So that my last year that I taught, I had students who, at the beginning, hated poetry, and at the end, that one poem by Frost, that was. I'll give it to you, Mr. Dolworth. That was pretty good. And it's like, hey, boom, that's it. Like, we don't hate poetry anymore, right? That's fantastic.
Well, I was involved in a conversation one time. I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast previously or not, but the task of the group was to try and state in one sentence what the purpose of education is. And we never made it past the first guy
Hmm.
because his statement was education is the raising of taste. And we
Yeah,
spent a couple of hours back and forth and elitism and blah, 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 blah. But I can't get past the fact that at least Augustine gives me a pretty good push on the ordering of tastes, at least, or
right,
the ordering of our loves, right?
right.
That when you expose a student, I see this all the time with music and my sons, right? You don't have to give them an appetite for pop music or for simple music. Their heart can obtain that rather easily. But
Hmm.
for hard music that you have to work at a little bit,
Hmm.
um, over time they go from oh no to hey, you haven't played any, whatever. None of them have ever said that about opera, but
Sure,
I'm
sure.
still working on them. They're still
Right.
young, all right.
Yeah.
But that development of an appetite for something new or something, especially something that's strongly beautiful, right?
Hmm.
Poetry's not just immediately accessible. It it takes time to sink in,
That's right.
and it scares some people, right?
Sure.
So because they immediately think our schooling, I think, makes students feel like he's going to test me on this. I have to, and I try to assure them that I do a number of things in class that are just for that experience. I'm not going to bring it back up on a test and have you slice and dice it and analyze it to
Right.
death and kill the thing.
Right.
I just wanted you to hear this.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
there was no bigger objective than that.
Right.
So
That's large enough. Yeah. That's
yeah,
good. So let's turn to our thoughts of season 3,
yeah,
Steve. As we're looking out at season 3, we've mentioned some things to one another, but we haven't really thought it out. So I think it would be wise of us to just kind of have a little session here where we say, what about this? What about that? And
yeah.
this would be another place where our listeners, of course, we would covet your feedback, right? We would want you to say, Jason got it all wrong here when he wanted to focus on this. Steve was closer, but also wrong. And what you really need to be thinking about in season 3 is this sort of thing. So there you go, listener. This is the second time we've prompted you, so I better have a full email. I better have a full inbox in the morning, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Uh,
but we have some of the things you and I have talked about have at least begun from the notion of we do have a few listeners now. What kind of a listener seems to be getting attracted to our
mm-hmm,
podcast?
mm-hmm.
We have some what I'll call traditional classroom teachers, but we have a fair amount of homeschool folk, and
Yeah,
I think that's a not to give it any one factor, but with what's happened with COVID and sort of a resurgence of homeschooling there, sort
mm-hmm.
of thrust upon people, but the interest kind of got spiked.
Yeah,
I
that's
do
right.
think I think looking down over the coming 26, 27 episodes, uh, a portion of those are going to be us kind of taking on some question that particularly appertains to not what you and I do on a daily basis, but what you and I have both done individually in our homes, and education being education, whether it's in the home or in the classroom. Uh, trying to aim some of our thoughts towards those bold and courageous parents who say, "Hey, I'm going to try and teach my child at home,"
Yeah,
and then start sweating,
yeah.
or
Well, it is. It's
I don't know
nerve
if it's
wracking.
yeah,
Certainly,
it's a new thing.
definitely.
It's a new endeavor, and so with that, almost always comes questions,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that those are great questions. All too often, the questions I get from new teachers in the classroom are the wrong questions. They're trying to make a
Yeah,
very very difficult thing easy or formulaic, and I kind of nudge them in other directions. But most parents, when they get into this thing, sometimes have some misconceptions about what is and is not good to do. But most of the time, it's very practical, very how can we get this thing going type of
mm-hmm.
questions rather than the how many erasers can you fit on the head of a pen
Sure.
or
Well, so I think that first year teachers. I mean, when I was a first year teacher, my primary concern. Man, should I say this? Yeah, I think it is true that one. I'll soften it a little. One of my primary concerns was not looking like an idiot, right?
yeah,
So did I want to educate the children? Of course, absolutely. Did I want to prepare them for greater things? I honestly and ardently did. But I was also insecure about myself and my completely unproven teaching abilities. and I did not want to look like a moron.
Right.
And so for the homeschooling parent, it's an interesting difference, right? Because the parent is like, look, my kid has already seen me look smart. My kid has already seen me look like an idiot. We're past that. And we're playing for keeps. Like, this is my child who, in a few short years, is not going to be my responsibility in the same way that they are right now. They're going to be an adult, and yet they're always going to be my child. So I need to get this right now.
Yeah.
And so the stakes, even if they aren't different, they're perceived differently. And so, yeah, with all of the things that are going on with a sort of resurgence of homeschool, a big push to homeschool in a lot of communities, I think it makes sense for us to spend some time there because we kind of have one foot on the land and one foot in the sea, right? We have a foot in each world, and we are able to um, maybe hear both sides better than somebody who's only in one. Um, Although, I don't know, you could probably talk me off that claim if you really pushed me. Even still, I think the conversation is good. And so I would like to have us work through some homeschool issues as we're going along. I think like one, a lot of people ask like, okay, so what does that actually look like practically? Um, One thing, Steve, tell me. I haven't brought this up to you, so so tell me what you think. Feel free to shoot me down in front of everybody here. Um, the the thought of taking a look at some different homeschool curricula that are sold or touted to different populations and just, you know, giving it the once over, taking a deep look at it, and then getting on a podcast and having a conversation like, this is what we saw that was good or bad or whatever
Yep.
about this particular curriculum, right?
Yep. Well, and that's a lot of it. So the map curricula, right? The
Mm-hmm.
pathway
Mm-hmm.
is, it can be overrated and underrated, but it's got a place. And for
Yeah,
homeschooling parents, it it, it a classroom teacher is often being given the curriculum, right? The school has
indeed.
said, here's what I want you to teach. The parent gets to choose that, but when you go search homeschool curriculum, even put the word free on it, and you'll
Mm-hmm.
get so many and such a divergent amount of possibilities
It's
that
true.
that that I'm certainly not going to shoot that down. I think it's that there are certain curricula that I have worked with and like, and others that I have some concerns about.
Right. We may hold on. Don't nobody move. I have to get this reference in. We might end up finding a green book or two, right?
Well, if we do, I'll be sure to debunk it for you.
Right. Thank you. Gaius and Titius have what actually? So I it was my reference, but I can't quote it rightly. I know it's C.S. Lewis, but is it The Abolition of Man?
Yes, yeah, that's how
Okay.
he
All
starts
right.
out. Is he's gotten ticked off because he interacted with these authors of this green book who are having a difficulty with the difference between pretty and
Beauty.
sublime.
Yeah. Sublimity. That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but his point that he takes off from there is that of course education today is much less about the uh, cultivation of virtue and much more about the calling out of there being really no virtue. Um,
Yeah.
and it's a sad state of affairs.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, I think that our listeners have responded well when, so far, I think it's just been me. You haven't interviewed anybody, have you?
Dude, I know. I got to get my interview game up, especially
Right.
because I can edit. Like, I should be doing it.
Yeah. I think we've had some great opportunities. And one of the things that fascinates me now that you and I can actually sit on a back porch is my assumption is that a third mic and a third chair could pretty easily be procured,
Yeah.
and we could tag team some poor
Sap.
person if we can find them local or get them local.
Sure.
But my intent is to continue to seek ways to bring other minds into this podcast by thinking some about homeschooling. That in particular, I have a number of friends and acquaintances and people that I could bug into talking about those things that have some places of prominence curricularly and in having done it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I look forward to being able to continue that. I think we may in the near future. We've done it's kind of started a couple of little series that we do every once in a while. Have you met with the
Yeah.
interviews, and
Right.
have you read? We've done a couple of books,
We
a few
have.
books. We still haven't done one of our ideas of have you seen, talking about a movie that has
We
something
haven't
to
done
do with
any
education.
movies?
I don't believe so.
Oh my gosh.
We said we
Wait,
were
wait,
going
yes,
to.
we did. Yes, we did. We did Finding Forrester.
Yes, there we go. See, I need you around because I forget what we've recorded.
Right.
I know we intend at some point to do Mel Gibson's directorial debut, Man Without
Right.
a Face.
Yeah.
And if you can't think of a question, listener, suggestions for who you'd like to hear interviewed or books you would like reviewed by us, if you think we have any ability in that regard,
Right.
or
Curriculum that you want
movies.
reviewed, I
Yep,
would say add that.
yep. So if it's as simple as, hey, are you bold enough to interview so and so? We'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of what does it hurt to ask.
Sure.
Sometimes it actually does hurt to be told no, but I'm willing to be hurt in
Sure.
order to ask. Let's say it that
Sure.
way.
Sure.
Other ideas that you don't want me to shoot down?
Let's see. I don't know, man. That's the big one for me. In thinking back on our episodes, like I know one of the first ones out of the gate was sort of tech and education. Um,
Yep.
I think that we didn't realize how right we were. I don't remember the details of that one, so I might just be remembering it fondly when we actually were just like kind of kicking dirt clods around. But I remember our kind of conclusion was love it or hate it. That's not what we're talking about. The facts are that it's coming, and so what are you going to do with it, right? Like, how are you going to work with it?
Right.
Um,
And I think there's
and
a lot more for us to talk about in that regard now,
yeah,
post COVID,
right,
because we even have learned that there's a real difference between purposeful remote learning, online teaching
yeah,
that's been going on for a number of years now, and many universities in particular are um, really kind of drilling down into that, trying to figure out how to do it in an engaging and beneficial way,
hmm
as opposed to having it thrust upon you as tens of thousands of teachers had done to them
they
a
did,
few months ago. All of a sudden, your only choice is to try and translate what was going on in the classroom into Google Meet or Zoom or something.
yeah,
And boy, was that a curve.
yep,
Um, because if I know we said it, but if we didn't say it loud enough way back then, the online classroom and the physical classroom and I'll say the kitchen table and homeschooling are three totally different environments.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not dismissing any one of those.
No,
I'm
not
just
at all.
saying that if you try and make one like either of the others, you're in trouble.
Right. Well, exactly. To say that one is the same, or to say that they're all the same, you are then dismissing two of the others, right?
Yeah, right.
They are different, and they come with unique challenges, unique constraints, and unique tools
Well, and I love the
and
fact that
advantages.
many homeschoolers are recognizing that it doesn't have to be all one thing, right? So there's a good amount of education going on between parent and child. That's homeschooling, but it branches out from those. There's the co-op or
Right.
occasional classroom experience where they say, well, I want my child's mind interacting with other
Ooh,
minds.
dude, that I'm sorry to interrupt, but that might be a cool episode to do where we sort of say, like, we come up with a list of questions, like, so you want to start a co-op, right? Like, what are the shibboleths, right? Like,
Right.
what are the sort of big issues for I'm handing my child over to you for this certain amount of time for you to teach them this subject. What philosophically do we really need to agree on? And what is like not a deal breaker, right?
Yep. Yep.
Um, what do I need to know? Like, just sort of, I'm going to do the best I can, and I'm going to be your kid's teacher. That's not enough, right? Like I want to know more than that. I want to know what you think you're doing when you say educating, right? I want to
Yeah.
know these sorts of things. And so maybe we could do an episode like that. I don't know.
Yeah. I think if someone is willing to take the big step of homeschooling, they have the desire to go deeper, to know more
Hmm.
than maybe the the act of simply enrolling them. So certainly, people, I think, even with public schooling, uh, have some sense of what's going to be taught and what should be taught in the third grade or the eighth grade or whatever. If nothing else, their own experience, right?
Sure.
And sometimes we unfortunately assume that education never changes, and that what I experienced years ago in eighth grade is what my eighth grader should be experiencing.
Hmm.
But with homeschooling, I think the philosophical agreement between a co-op and of course it's interesting to me that many folks are homeschooling. I'm not so certain that they should call it homeschooling so much as we've chosen to educate our students online at home.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
a good
so
point.
because I see many of them, to them their curriculum is mostly online experiences for their kids, and I would love to have conversation and make some judgments about that, but I'm not
Yeah,
at the moment.
yeah,
I'm just saying it's fascinating that all three of those venues that I started out with, the homeschool parent seems to be in a place of flexibility to where they can elicit the help of other educators, and some of those online and some of those down the street at the co-op.
yeah.
Um, they kind of get the educational smorgasbord, maybe a little bit more uh, Gumby like than somebody who's just simply enrolled their child in a school, and of course hopefully are thrilled with what the student is experiencing, but it's sort of a set. Uh, at least the main course is set. They might have some electives, some side dishes they can they can
Sure.
choose from, but the core is already laid out for them. Whereas, like I said, homeschooling, it requires a lot of thought, but it offers a lot of opportunity that thought can bring with it. So I'm excited
Definitely.
about the year to come. I hope. Yeah, I tell my students this. Right, this might be the place for me to add to the conversation.
Hmm.
I tell my students I can talk forever about
Oh,
anything
okay.
that we're studying.
Yeah.
Right, I'm an English teacher, and at high school level, it's basically a literature teacher. I mean, we do a lot of writing, but it comes out of the literature.
Sure.
We certainly still throw around grammar, but again, that's in the context of what they're writing, and the content of what they're writing about is what we're reading.
Mm-hmm.
And I teach a lot of medieval literature that I love. I could teach a whole course on any one of the books that we read. So I tell them, look, there's no worries here about us just sitting here staring at each other. I have plenty to say.
Sure.
But I believe you have plenty to say. And if you really want a fantastic class, or I would say to the podcast listener, who I'm really addressing at the moment, if you want an intriguing and interesting podcast, it's what you want to talk about that actually gets me more interested than me telling you what I already know about my thoughts about the subject at hand.
Yeah.
And that's when it gets great, right? If we're in the midst of, we're right down in the fifth level of hell with Dante and Virgil, and a kid goes, "Hey, XYZ," and says something regularly. They say something I never thought about before.
Yeah, it's good.
And often they're tuned into what it is not only they want to talk about, but what their classmates want to talk about. And it's where the real itch is. And Elliot over here in his ivory tower is still just going back over what I saw the last time I was here.
Sure.
So I just, if we could say it for about the 15th time, fill up our comment box, right? You can do that through the website. You can do that through Facebook. We have a Twitter account if you want to find us there.
We do?
We do.
Wow. I think I remember you telling me that, but I never.
It's active. No, nothing other than this podcast would have ever gotten me to get on Twitter.
Right.
But now it's almost daily. Probably 4 to 5 times a week we post something, usually either encouraging them to listen what we just put out there, or scaring them with what's to come.
Wow. That's amazing. Dude, good job on that. I knew, now that you say it, I knew that, and I remember now, but you're just over here doing work. I'm skipping out on stuff.
I know one of the followers is your mother-in-law. So.
Oh, okay. Well, mother-in-law of mine, if you're listening.
I don't know if she listens to the podcast or not. I just know she follows us on Twitter.
Oh.
She's probably hoping sooner or later we're going to actually post a picture of, you.
Right.
Hey, that's my son-in-law.
Right. Yeah.
All right.
That's funny. Awesome. Well, good talk. I think I'm invigorated about what's happening next season. I'm excited to look into the future and say, oh yeah, there are some things, right? Miles to go before we sleep. There are topics that are beckoning to us. It's an exciting place to be, Steve. When we started, I could not conceive of having done over 50 episodes and talking about doing more.
Yep.
I didn't know what this was, but it's really a comfortable thing. And, you're a great pal to do it with. You're a good conversation partner. So, man,
well, thanks.
Looking forward to all this.
Let us then be up and doing.
Yes,
with a heart for any fate. Still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait.
Amen.